Ian, the Wada Games federal civil class action lawsuit is still going on. I thought about the timeline of this. We've been talking about Wada Games now for over 5 years at this point. That's how long we've been talking about Wada Games, and us originally thinking, oh, this would be nice to have a reputable game grading company with people
at the time, it seemed like it might have been a
good idea.
We were cautiously optimistic.
Yes, because VGA was sort of like, we don't know who these people are. And I heard sketchy rumors about them. Boy, those were quaint times. But then something happened 5 years ago, literally this month. In February of 2019, a game sale made waves, made headlines. There were multiple major news articles talking about it. Ars Technica, New York Post. There were YouTubers talking about it. It was the $100,000 sale of a Super Mario Brothers for NES. A sticker sealed one. I think second print, not even first print that happened for $100,000. I believe it was
second, yes, because I think we had talked about that.
Yeah. And that happened, and at the time, we said, this looks weird. Because even in press releases, they let out that, hey, this was purchased by a group of people, which is always weird, because I never heard of a major game game purchase happening with groups of people ever.
Anything being purchased by a group of people always seems off to me, but because there's more than just the purchase there.
Sure.
There's something going on.
This is a plan. When you have multiple people, it's now a plan. It's not a one-off where, hey, I want to buy something I like. You have to talk to people about this and planning to do something and why you're planning to do something. But what alarmed Ian and me at the time, and this was public, to their credit, they said it. One of the buyers was Jim Halperin.
Yes.
Who is the owner of Heritage Auctions, which by that time was entering into agreement to exclusively auction off video games graded by Wada Games, but was also a founding investor in Wada Games. So the ethical dilemmas, not even dilemmas, problems that this immediately showed us were bad. We knew this was not clean. And at the time, we knew that this was done to show a new height of retro video game sales happening. Because before, it was around $30,000, $35 or so, for the height of a video game sale. We're going to put it to six figures, Ian, and make it 100,000. Why? It's a nice number. It's a nice number, right? They could have said
literally just the number they wanted. Just pulled out
100,000 and 150. For they threw 150 on there for some reason. So at the time we said, well, this is wrong because these people have a vested interest, particularly Jim Halperin, for pumping up the video game market, being an investor in Wada Games and owning the website that auctions off the Wada graded games. To me, it was a fucking slam dunk. And to Ian, was like, this is bad. This is wrong. This is manipulation. It took a long time for folks to come around to our point of view. More mainstream. People that listened to us said, you guys are right. This looks fishy. A lot of other people thought it was okay. This Super Mario sale is one of the main claims and tenets of the class action lawsuit. And now there's public documents, including the declaration for the class, to certify the class, that tells us what the arguments are. And there's a public written deposition. It's written. They do it in front of a video camera, usually when they depose people, of Dennis Kahn, who was the founder and president of Wada Games, of his testimony. And part of that was this video game sale and how there was a plan leading up to make this sale, and more of the inner details that have now come to light that we weren't privy to. We thought some of this was happening, but this sale turns out to be worse than what we thought about it at the time. Right? Am I saying anything wrong?
No, I'm listening. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not on a line. So I want to go through the argument from the declaration. Is it the declaration an evidence motion for class certification. We're going to read through it. Then, Ian, if you want to stop me or anything, or go to the actual deposition for some of these finer points, we can do that on here. All right, page 6. Sale of the Super Mario Brothers game. Plaintiffs maintain, remember, the plaintiffs are suing because they feel that WATA Games broke their contract in terms of the timeliness of them getting the games back to them. Some claim they didn't get the game for a year and a half after sending it in, saying you can have it back within a month or two. But also, the other part of the lawsuit is that fraud. The fact that they feel they've been defrauded for getting into this market partially and wanting graded games because of the activity of WATA Games and Associates, which this Super Mario Brothers landmark sale was a part of, they argue. So plaintiffs maintain that defendants and other individuals engage in an unlawful scheme to unfairly profit from customers. WATA, Heritage Auctions, James Halperin, Dennis Kahn, Dan Maresca, Mark Hassel, and Richard Lecce engaged in a scheme to pump up the retro video game market by publicizing misleading information about the sale of a Super Mario Brothers game. WATA profited from increased interest in the retro video game market and charging customers higher prices based on the inflated value of the games. Remember, they're taking a percentage, which was a component of WATA's pricing model. Additionally, the increased interest from the publication of the supposed sale of the game increased demand for the company's services overall. Heritage Auctions also profited by increased interest and higher prices in its WATA-graded video game auctions because it made money from charging both buyers and sellers fees and premiums for sales. This is stuff we talked about years ago. And not that it gives me, I'm not glad to see this come out in a federal class action lawsuit, but it's good at least that others agreed with us when we were talking about this stuff years ago. Mm-hmm. Continuing, Dennis Kahn was the president and CEO of WATA from its inception until its sale to Collectors Universe, July 1st, 2021. WATA began offering video game grading and encapsulation services to the public in April of 2018. By October of 2018, WATA was already appearing at conventions under a joint banner with Heritage Auctions. That I did not know. I did not know they were appearing at conventions under a joint banner with Heritage. That I did not know. If we had known, I'm sure we would have talked about that at the time. Continuing. On October 8th, 2018, Kahn was interviewed by IGN, a video game publication, at New York Comic Con, where he manned the WATA/Heritage booth. During the IGN interview, Kahn showcased the Super Mario Brothers game and noted the owner was interested in selling the game, which is weird because if you're just a grading service, why are you telling the public a game is for sale? Why are you advertising that? That's right. A conflict of interest as well. Kahn then estimated this. Remember, this is October of 2018. Kahn estimated the value of the game at $100,000. This all comes from the deposition. You can also read online if you download it. Because Kahn did not disclose the seller's identity or contact information, any potential buyer would have had to seek out Kahn to facilitate a sale. That's problematic as well, in my opinion. There was no interest and no sale. So this is a timeline. Remember, in 2018, they're just still having the run-up of WATA Games being this new, I guess, industry leader in game grading, right? All throughout 2018, they're going to these conventions and they're doing articles, they're talking to people. And during this, Dennis Kahn is saying, this Super Mario Brothers game, I think, is worth $100,000. Continuing. In January of 2019, which was just before the announcement of the supposed record-setting sell and issue, Kahn and Mark Haspel, a WATA investor and chief advisor, took a trip to Heritage Auctions headquarters and met with Jim Halperin. Thereafter, the James and Gail Halperin Foundation, a nonprofit run by James Halperin, and Richard Lecce were issued stock by WATA. So now we're getting more nitty-gritty of the business relationships happening. We're getting into, okay, potentially, this is going to probably be argued, they decided to hatch a plan. What can we do to really build this up? So at that point, looking at this timeline, I would make an argument. They decided, well, let's do a big sale item, and then this is going to get interest in these games to be auctioned off at your company, Jim. And that's what this looks like is the timeline that's happening. There was also an understanding reached that Heritage Auctions would be selling WATA games at their auctions to the exclusion of other video game grading companies. At the time, we always thought that was weird because this was an upstart company. Why would you only have one company and not try to do VGA at the same time? Why would you have a monopoly on it? Now you know why. we knew at the time, but with Jim Halpern's involvement with WADA, being an investor, but now we know why in particular with the timeline. Around this time, Khan also admits he had a telephonic conversation with WADA's ownership group, which included Halpern, Haspel, Lecce, and Khan to discuss the proposed sale. Khan claims he was asked if he wanted to be part of the purchase. Khan says he declined to be a part of the purchase because it would be inappropriate for him to trade in WADA-graded games, a point he would later make again publicly to the New York Times in an interview. Khan felt the grading games that he owned would have given the appearance of a conflict of interest. Now we get to the sale.
Where does he mention this?
He mentioned in the deposition on.
Well, he mentioned in the deposition. Okay, do you remember anything else, even if it's general, about having the telephone conversation? The telephone conversation was about the sale, and his response was, other than me saying no, and that given my position, as much as I'd love to, genuinely, that I wouldn't be able to partake in it. Don't remember anything else, and I believe the conversation probably ended after that.
In around February of 2019, the alleged sale of the Super Mario Brothers game occurred. The seller was a collector and friend of Khan's named Dan Maresca. I'm going to stop right here. Dan Maresca was known as Bronte online on Nintendo Age going back almost 15 years at this point. I used to argue with Dan Maresca on Nintendo Age about graded game collecting back then and how it was actually like a weird offshoot of regular game collecting. It wasn't considered to me the same thing. We had these arguments back and forth. Dan Maresca was a part of the WADA advisory board. He was on the website as of end of 2018. You can go to the Wayback Machine and you can see it. So you have a guy that was involved in helping start WADA, now helping sell his game to WADA. That's why they wanted to keep his name out of this back at the time with those articles, because it looked improper because it was. It was slimy because it was. But we're just getting to the tip of the iceberg. This isn't even like the important new information coming out of this that we're going to get to. On February 14, 2019, James Halpern touted the sale, the buyers, and the price paid in a post on Heritage Auctions website. We did a topic on that back then. The announcement also contained quotes from WADA president and co-founder Dennis Kahn. Kahn stated, while many video games sell regularly for 5 figures, breaking the 6-figure mark shows the hobby's upward trajectory indicates no sign of slowing down. James Halpern further implied he may sell the game in one of Heritage's auctions. That never occurred, by the way. The supposed sale of the game to James Halpern, a WADA investor, WADA advisory board member, and co-founder of Heritage Auctions, Richard Lecce, WADA investor and self-described co-founder of WADA, who, by the way, in all his private emails to me trying to get me to pump up the market on the podcast and trying to buy my shit, Richard never revealed to me that he was officially involved with WADA in those emails, by the way. And one of Lecce's friends, Zach Geeg, was a historically high sale price for any video game. Previously, the highest sale for such a comparable video game was about $30,000. This sale was a newsworthy event and was carried out to the public based on the Heritage announcement by publications such as Fox News and the New York Times. Unbeknownst to the public, the information was inaccurate. In reality, this is the big news from this deposition stuff. In reality, there actually was no legitimate sale of the Super Mario Brothers game. I will repeat that. In reality, there actually was no legitimate sale of the Super Mario Brothers game. This is what's being argued. Rather, seller Maresca retained an interest in the game. That's in the deposition. That's new information. That information, ladies and gentlemen, was never disclosed anywhere. It wasn't disclosed in the Heritage Auctions press release, nor in any news item at the time. You know why? That looks bad. That's not a proper sale if a seller retains an interest in the game at that point. That's not a sale. I've never heard of a big video game sale happening, Ian, in 25 years plus of collecting where a seller sold a game, but they maintained an interest in the game. Never have I heard of that.
No, that's let us throw you some money. We're going to say this sold for $100,000, and we're going to use that to base our entire argument that video games are skyrocketing in the collectibles market. And that's why people need to get their games graded with us.
I'll not even say
it's creating, using that to try to create a market.
Correct. Additionally, all the buyers were not named. This is the other piece of information that you'll find in a second why they don't want this to come out.
Well, here we go. So talking about the game, is Mr. Lecce the individual who, in your knowledge, negotiated the deal with Maresca? Yes. And it was Lecce, Halperin, and Geig who purchased the game, right? Yes, they were the purchasers. Anybody else? Yes. Who else was a purchaser? Mark Haspel.
Who is Mark Haspel? Mark Haspel was on the WADA executive team. He was on basically their board, you want to call him board of directors. You can go back to the Wayback Machine. You can see him as one of the 4 main board members on the site, along with Kenneth Thrower, who we'll get to. Mark Haspel was in promo videos with Dennis Kahn. If you go to the WADA Games YouTube channel, Ian, there are 2 videos on there. One is at a trade show, and one they're talking about the importance of graded games. Mark Haspel's in both of those. He was part and parcel part of WADA Games. And he ends up being, it's bad enough Jim Halperin, one of the investors of WADA, was purchasing, but now Mark Haspel, who was involved, also being a part of the purchasing team. And this was never disclosed to anyone, ever. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why, because it looks improper and it looks like a shill sale happening. This is ridiculous. We gave them way too much credit even 5 years ago talking about this. We thought all of the information coming out where they were at least being honest and forthright. They weren't, Ian. They weren't. Not shocked, right?
No, not particularly shocking in any way, shape, or form.
And in the deposition, Ian, you can read where Dennis Kahn tries to say, well, he wasn't working for WADA. He's in the WADA videos. He's on the executive board. I literally witnessed him at Too Many Games 2019 wearing a fucking WADA shirt, buying games. At the time, I didn't know what was happening. I thought, well, maybe he's just collecting games and then storing them. No, he was likely buying them in order to profit off them. Journalist Seth Abramson bought games from Mark Haspel that he had graded Atari ones and Intellivision off of eBay. This whole thing was rotten from the start. I mean, we kind of knew that, but now we know it in black and white from Dennis Kahn's own words, how rotten it was to the core.
So, here it is. So, and I think you can identify, did Mark Haspel ever work for WADA? No. And he was an investor, is that correct? Yes. Other than that role, was he ever on the advisory board? No.
How can Dennis
have any other relationship with WADA? He held the title of chief advisor.
He went to the conventions with Dennis Kahn and represented WADA, and he's in the videos promoting WADA. You're telling me he didn't work for WADA?
Say someone was a chief investor but did not work for WADA.
He worked for them and was an investor.
Or chief advisor.
It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's improper. It's disgusting. And they knew it was improper, and that's why it was never publicized that he was part of the buying group. I'm going to continue now. All the other buyers were also affiliated with WADA as investors, founders, and/or advisory board members. The sale was likely facilitated by Dennis Kahn himself, given the timing and sequence of events and the fact that Kahn had just set the price a few months prior. So Dennis Kahn publicly says, I think this game was worth $100,000, which he should never have done, by the way, as the leader of a grading company. You should never be getting into what the actual price is. Then a few months later, this sale happens for the magical price of $100,000.
Right.
After there had no interest, no one had interest in that game, it sounds like, that whole year of 2018.
Because it was a ridiculous price to assume anyone could get for a game.
Yes, at the time. Now it seems quaint. On February 15, 2009.
Why does it feel quaint? Because that sale happened and set everything in motion.
Correct. It was the spark that lit the fuse of this whole speculative bubble. On February 15, 2019, online publication Ars Technica quoted Kahn and Halperin when they were both hyping up the sale of the game. Halperin stated, there are bets on what will someday be the first $1 million video game, and many collectors believe that this will be the one. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't. It was Super Mario 64, which set up giant fire alarms to everyone when that happened. Kahn confirmed, if video games are going to be the way of comics and coins, then there will be one day be $1 million video game sale, and I think that this is a game that's going to happen. The game's supposed seller, Dan Maresca, also gave an interview to Ars Technica about the sale. Maresca, despite publicly identifying himself as the owner of the game on the internet before the sale, used a pseudonym in his interviews, presumably to try to obscure his connection to WADA. He was wiped from the site by them, by the way. Once you go to the Wayback Machine in 2019, Dan Maresca is no longer on the site. He's there in 2018. The Ars Technica article was published by Kyle Orland on February 23rd, 2019, and is entitled $100,000 Mario Seller. It's probably the wrong move long-term to sell. In the article, Maresca is quoted as follows: "It's probably the wrong move long-term to sell, but because of the value involved in the potential risk and it being hard to insure and so on, I'm going to sell it and take the profit and leave it as that." Thereafter, one of the three publicly identified so-called buyers, Richard Lecce, appeared on season 17, episode 5 of the television show Pawn Stars, entitled Pawn vs. Ferrari with the Super Mario Brothers. The episode aired in November of 2019. Lecce appeared on the show claiming to want to sell the game to the pawn shop operators for $1 million. Khan was called in as an independent expert.
I forgot about that.
Khan was called in.
Not the show, but $1 million.
Yes, Khan was called in as an independent expert, even though my sources told me they traveled to that show together to appear on it. Khan and Lecce pretended not to know each other. Again, Khan implied the value of the game was now $1 million or more, even though it just sold allegedly for $100,000. So they manufacture a $100,000 sale, and then not even, Ian, 9 months later, that game goes up 10 times more, even though before the $100,000 sale, sticker sale sealed games were not known to go for even 5 figures. Like I did not know the games going for that much money. NES games are not going for 5 figures except for like NWC carts and Same Events games for the most part. Anyway, as a result of the news coverage, defendant WADA experienced a massive increase in demand for services as collectors rushed to have games graded. The demand and price of WADA graded video games through heritage auctions increased dramatically. And this is all information from the deposition.
Yep.
This is all stuff out of Dennis Kahn's mouth. So we're not making up shit. Obviously, some of these arguments being made about, well, this was a manufactured sale. This is an extrapolation of the facts that Dennis Kahn himself put into evidence through the deposition. So this is a travesty, obviously. It's a travesty for a lot of reasons. It's obviously a travesty that these folks successively, milked a lot of unsuspecting people to get into the graded game market when it was false. It was a hyperinflated bubble. We know that. But Ian, I think the bigger travesty is this. We never said, Ian and I said that video games shouldn't be worth any form of money. Never. We just thought it was improper to have people tricked into thinking games are worth a lot of money. When there are games that are historically worth a lot of money, there always were games, Ian, that were worth, of course, 4 and 5 figures. I think one of the tragedies of this long term, because like with comic books, Ian, it took decades for these games to reach the heights that I got to, right? We were robbed of that. As video game collecting fans and fans of videos, we were robbed of any form of organic growth for a lot of these games to even happen. We'll never know if, for example, a sticker seal Super Mario Brothers could be worth $100,000 because it didn't happen organically. We were robbed of that. It's not to say that it couldn't have been worth that in 10 years from now or 15, but we were robbed of that happening for a lot of these games.
I don't know if we're robbed of it, though. I mean, I feel like over time, things will settle back down to where they should be, and we'll be able to tell. But it definitely screwed it up for quite some time.
But it'll never go back to a natural trajectory, Ian, because it's bouncing up, bouncing down. There's never going to be a natural, slow growth and I'm not saying it's going to occur for a lot of these games, but who's to say that in 25 years from now, a sticker seal first print Super Mario Bros. Couldn't have been worth $500,000.
Sure.
But not next year. That's the point. Going from worth a few thousand to 100,000, that's where it's improper. That's where it's not right. That's where these people manufactured this.
Yes, they're just trying to accelerate it.
Yes. And now it's in black and white in a deposition in a lawsuit. Ian, one of the other things in Dennis Kahn's deposition that was interesting was that the good old dentist, Eric Nierman, sounds like he purchased his games from Dan Maresca as well. His sealed games.
Okay, and do you know were Mr. Maresca's games that he sold to Dr. Nierman graded by WADA or VGA? They were initially graded by VGA. Had they been regraded by WADA, Yes. Did Mr. Maresca have all of his VGA graded games regraded by WADA? No. Again, the ones I'm talking about are the ones that I know Dr. Nyerman purchased from Maresca. These are the ones that I'm referring to, and those were crossed from VGA to WADA.
So
okay, so
that's where it's admitted. So Dan Maresca had the balls to do these interviews and say it might be the wrong thing to sell this game so early. Meanwhile, he's selling the bulk of his big black box and other games to someone for, I think it was reported to be like high six figures, I believe at the time, up to $1 million to Eric Nyerman's investing group. He profited like as much as he could at the time, especially with people not knowing the source of those games, by and large. Behind the scenes, people knew in the scene, but like he profited perfectly. He helped engineer this. His name should be brought up more often as part of this group of people. And that's what this part of this deposition shows. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts versus what I brought up, Ian, but
I mean, you covered it. You ran right through it.
But it's a lot worse than what we gave it credit for. And the folks that wrote the articles, like the New York Post article, Kyle Orland, who wrote the Ars Technica article, they should be pissed off as well, because they basically false reported on something that happened where they were not given all the information at the time. And this was passed off as being proper when we knew it wasn't. But I would hope that these reporters would then, hopefully, if not write a full story about this news, at least write a retraction or an update to these original stories with the real truth about how bullshit these sales were, where the seller didn't actually sell the entire game. He kept an interest in it. And Mark Haspel, who worked for WADA, was on the advisory board, and an investor, was one of the buyers, and they for some reason kept that out of all the news.
Well, Halpern was a buyer too, so I mean,
yes, but they try to hide the fact that, well, Halpern wasn't really involved with WADA when Mark Haspel was day to day and was representing them at all these conventions on top. As obviously,
no, I agree. I also think Halpern was more of a day to day person than.
Oh, he could have been. Yeah, he could have been advising them behind the scenes. Absolutely. But I'm saying, like, as a face of the company, Mark Haspel was a face of the company. He's in their videos. He went to the conventions. He was wearing the fucking WADA shirt. I saw him at too many games. He was a part of this as well. So there you have it, Ian. So
I don't know why you're talking to me. You're talking to the crowd. I'm well aware.
Well, you're part of it. Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'm dominating the conversation though. Much to our chagrin, which can happen. Was there any other nuggets from the deposition? I think the summary covered a bunch of it there. I like how Dennis didn't want to admit at first there were other buyers of the game. He had to be prodded by the attorney. Were there any other buyers of the game? Oh yeah, Mark Haspel. And it's like, oh, well, that's kind of important to mention,
yeah,
right?
Well, you don't want to fuck around in a depot. The only other thing that I would point out is this question. Again, do you know of any WADA employees who did sell great games that have been graded by the company? Yes. And who were those people? Kenneth Thrower. Anybody else? Nope. Did Mr. Thrower, was he terminated for that conduct? No.
Okay. Kenneth Thrower was the lead grader. If you don't want to say Mark Haspel was a worker, Kenneth Thrower was a worker. And so this is something we never knew about. We knew Mark Haspel was buying and selling games, and that was improper. But now you have your lead grader doing it, Kenneth Thrower, and he wasn't even fucking fired for it. This is a fucking joke. To pretend that this company had any integrity at all from the get-go. What a fucking joke. Thanks for pointing that out, Ian. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's a neat tidbit.
What a fucking disgrace. Just a bunch of rich collectors making themselves richer. That's what WADA Games, that was the goal of WADA Games. That's what the result's been.